This is Brother Ron, and welcome to We All Be News Radio and TV, the news-free Dixie for the 21st century.
We All Be is honored have on the one and only Dr. Earnestine Jenkins. He's truly, in the words of Duke Ellington, beyond category. Not only she is a historian extraordinaire, but she's a real community activist, and she had activated the ancestral memory of the people's grocery lynchings of that of Brother Thomas Moss and his business partners, Calvin McDowell and William Henry Stewart. We are at the historic dedication marker ceremony post, actually, for this event that she was the mastermind behind. And thank you, Dr. Jenkins, for being on with us to share your thoughts.
Thank you.
So what are your thoughts today that you finally got this marker in the ground over the gravesite of Thomas Moss? How do you feel about this situation?
It's difficult to find words, but I think probably sacred or blessing is good, historical, because it was just such an important personal thing to actually get done, and to have us come back out here and meet and have this ceremony. When you think about, there has probably not been a ceremony commemorating these three young men since they were actually interred here, but I'm sure that the black community at the time probably continued to come out here and remember these three young men. But yeah, it was really important, and I hope that it helps to maybe spur more important endeavors in documenting the African American history and presence in Memphis, because it's really important.
Now, can you give a short synopsis of why we're here today, gathered here for this ceremony or this cause?
Mm-hmm. To me, it's important to gather here because it's the bicentennial, and I don't think that there has been enough emphasis put on documenting African American history in the city, and so it's over 100 years, almost 200 years since this particular event happened. And after this event happened, Thomas Moss's wife, for instance, she left Memphis. We don't have an idea of what happened to Calvin McDowell's relatives. He was unmarried, and we don't know what happened to William Henry Stewart's relatives. He was also a young man, and he had not married yet. So it's just important to document how important those three young men were to their community, that they were loved by people, that they were all buried here together in this historic, sacred space. It's ironic that we have found the grave of Thomas Moss. We haven't found the graves of the other two young men yet. And to me, that's the kind of history that speaks. You know, that Thomas Moss was the one of the three men that was the closest to Ida B. Wells and spurred her to start the anti-lynching campaign and do all of that research on really trying to figure out why whites were intent on directing such violence towards black people. You know, and finding out that it wasn't about the rape. It was about the success that black people were having in the late 19th century and trying to intimidate them and keep them from doing that. So, yeah, they need to be remembered. You know, and thinking about when terrible incidents happen in your community like this, the 1866 Memphis Massacre, this 1892 lynching of these three young men, and still black people in this city were not run off by whites. They stayed and they continued to build their communities and build their homes here and make this city the definitive place that it is today.
So when you think about, you talking about the Memphis Massacre 1866 and the People's Grocery Lynching of 1892, what do you think was the cause of these events? Was it about, like, you know, what do you think were the cause or what have been proven in time why these things happen?
Well, with the 1866 Memphis Massacre, that was coming out of white people's feelings about having lost the war. And that was when you had several thousand, you know, there were probably almost 4,000 slaves that were in Memphis before that. And then you had the population increase to over 16,000 by the end of the Civil War. And then you had thousands of black men within this region that were serving with the Union Army. And so the appearance of black men in uniform after the Civil War, all of the black people that were settling here in Memphis after the Civil War, and that's the way they talked about Memphis. When you go back and look at the records, they referred to Memphis as a city of refuge, because you had the fort that was here that mostly former slaves had built. The Union Army was here, so it was a place where people felt protected. And it just blew up after the war in this confrontation with the police, even back then, and the former slaves. And so you had this violence where something like 46 blacks lost their lives and 2 white people by mistake. And behind the 1866 Memphis Massacre, you had the passage of the 14th Amendment, which the government passed to try to give blacks some additional protection. And that's how we define what a citizen is, all because of what happened in Memphis in 1866, the first 3 days of May. We get your definition of what a citizen is. That was when blacks were made citizens. And you have Trump trying to mess with that today. That's how we define citizenship in this country, because of what happened here in Memphis in 1866. And then you have this in 1892, and Ida B. Wells, not just in the United States, but going around the world, founding and establishing the anti-lynching campaign. All again because of what happened here in Memphis in 1892.
Wow. And so what was the reason for that, the lynching of her friends, especially her good friends? She was the godmother to his daughter, correct?
She was the godmother to his daughter, and his wife was pregnant at the time. And as the sources says, she fainted right here, you know, at this gravesite doing the ceremony and stuff. And Thomas Moss was one of the first black male men in Memphis, and this picture shows him wearing his uniform as his cap with his number on it, and his shirt as a mailman. And they had just started hiring black men as mailmen in the late 1880s and early 1890s, and he was one of the first ones. So he would have been a fairly established, older than the other 2 young men, family man, you know, and important in his church. He taught Sunday school in his church. And just, you know, even for the white people at the time, it was just mind-boggling that they lynched 3 young black men in this community that both white and black people knew as upstanding citizens.
But they were lynched because there was an economic competition with white people. Is that true?
Yeah, it would not have happened if it had not been for the anger and jealousy of the white man that had the store across the street. And the fact that this store that they opened up, this co-op store, was in competition with that store and doing good business.
And that's the People's Grocery.
Yeah. Okay. It would not have happened if he had not instigated it. You know, it was all on him. And getting a group of other white men to go in and take these 3 young men out of jail and take them up to the railroad tracks in North Memphis and kill them, shoot them to death.
So the thing about it was they were protecting their business, right?
Protecting their business. And in the initial incident, they had gotten word that this white man had gotten the sheriff and they were going to attack the store. And so that's the reason Calvin McDowell, he got into a fight with one of the men and knocked him down. And that was the reason they had their guns and stuff, because Calvin McDowell was a member of the Tennessee Rifles. That was one of the black military organizations that had helped protect Memphis during the yellow fever epidemics. And that was the reason they were armed, you know, and had their guns. And they shot some of those men. And the black community was on pins and needles because they thought that one of the white men that had been shot was going to die, but he didn't. So the black community thought everything was going to be okay. And so this white man took it further and went into the jail and took the keys and overpowered the white officer that was sitting there and took the 3 young men out purposely, because there were other men in jail. They particularly came in and got the 3 of these young men and took them up to the railroad track there in North Memphis and shot them to death.
So they didn't have social media at the time, but like the last words of Thomas Mouse was recorded for posterity, I guess. What did he say exactly?
He said something about leaving Memphis because there was no protection for blacks here. Calvin McDowell is the one, according to sources, that fought very strongly. He was a tall, well-built, white-looking black man who could have passed for white. And they said that he fought. A.L.L. Wells talks about this when she went around giving the speeches and talking about the incident. And that was the word of mouth and the way that black people were maintaining the oral tradition around the story, that he was the one that fought very hard because they looks like shot the gun off of his face because one of his eyes was missing and his lower jaw was all torn apart and stuff. So they shot him point blank in the face.
So basically, this is the lynching that jump-started A.L.L. Wells' career and also ran out of Memphis, correct?
Yes.
Why was that?
Yeah. Well, because of her close relationship with Thomas Moss. Mary Church Terrell, as I mentioned before, also had grown up with Thomas Moss, and so she writes about that as well. But that's the way activism often starts. Something as horrendous as this happens, and you just can't understand why. Like I said, these were not criminals. These were not young men that had a bad reputation. These were upstanding citizens. How could you have such hatred to do something like that? You know, and that spurred her activism, but it also spurred her interest in becoming a journalist, which she already had. She was working for the newspaper, and she just took it a step further and began to do research and travel throughout the South and document these stories where she had heard there had been a lynching, and started to ask those questions. And that's how she came to the conclusion, and she published her 2 pamphlets talking about this was all about jealousy and being intimidated by the success that Black Americans were having, even in front of all the obstacles that white people put in their way. It was never about the rape of white women.
And that anger white Memphians, some of them, or a lot of them.
Well, like I said, this is really a different kind of lynching, because this is a lynching that happened in a community. It's not like with the L. Persons lynching in 1917, when that was somebody that people didn't know. Mm-hmm. These people were known. They were living over there in this mixed black and white community along the curve in South Memphis. So this is just unique because these people knew each other. That white man knew them, just like he knew them. So, yeah, it's just something that's so unique about this particular thing here.
So you have any idea what happened to, like, you said, like, some of the people, like the Cal McDowell family, you know what happened, but you know, Bessie Moss,
she left. She left, and I don't want. It's either Ohio or Illinois, I think, or maybe Indiana, but one of the Midwestern states. She left eventually and went there. She was here for about another year.
Wow.
She was pregnant, remember, so she had to give birth and whatever. And she left and moved, and she didn't marry immediately, but she did marry someone else. I think after about 7 years old.
That's good. And she had a son, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So that's interesting. I saw that.
Maureen was the girl that was already here that Ida Wells was the godmother to, and then the child that she had after the lynching was the boy.
I think you had the picture. I saw the picture of her Ida with the son and the daughter.
Yeah, she continued her relationship with them because she was like a mother to the children. And in the Ida Wells archives at the University of Chicago, there are pictures of Maureen as a young woman, and a picture of Ida Wells with the 2 young children, and with Bessie Moss.
So, like, uncovering these type of stories, like we got this situation in the last couple of years, people taking down Confederate monuments and flags, but also you got what you're doing in terms of resurrecting the ancestral memory of our ancestors who were, I guess, part of this Black Holocaust, or so to speak, of America. By doing that, do you think it makes the case easy for reparations for blacks descendant of slaves, or this movement they got going on, Americans descendant of slaves? Does it make the case easy for reparations when you talk about stories like these?
I got a long answer for that one.
Okay.
Let me stop and take a little bit of...
Yeah, you drink water. Yeah.
Okay. So, the question, how would this impact the discussion around reparations? I think it's going to be important. I'm forgetting the name of the young congressman. He's Hispanic, Arizona, who gave a really good answer, or at least a well thought out answer, last week or so around the issue of reparations. And he had mentioned that if we can give reparations to people associated with Native American history, or if we can give reparations, for instance, to the descendants of some of the Japanese that were interned in the camps during World War II, then how come we cannot even have a discussion about reparations when it comes to people who were actually profited? And as he said, I'm not talking about reparations in terms of, a paycheck that you're going to give to somebody, but that we need to look at certain issues around race and issues around prison reform, education, other parts of our society that we know that we have not treated people in an equal manner in terms of access to education or access to good legal counsel or whatever, and we're locking people up, for instance, for crimes that we know that they did not commit and they may be innocent. We're sending mostly young black men to be executed with the death penalty laws that we have today. Or even the mayor in California that just spoke to that, and he's talking about, or actually he's going to do it, he is going to outlaw the death penalty in the state, because he says, that we are killing or executing men that are innocent, and most of these are young black men. So there are ways that if we want to do this, it can be done. And so I would suggest that people don't think that this is such an outlandish idea or it won't happen. I think that there's probably now that we're moving in that direction, that in some shape or form there's going to be some discussion or something happen around the whole issue of reparations.
I thank you, Dr. Jenkins, for that. And also, where's the exact location of Ida B. Wells' newspaper office? I know they got a mark on bill, but where's the exact location?
There was, that's about where they think it was, another building that she worked in. Mm-hmm. But she did, when she first came here and she worked for the newspaper, that was founded by the minister at Beale Street Baptist Church, then that was supposedly where the offices were for that newspaper. So that came out of the discussion we were having about there is an interest in Memphis in having a statue of Ida B. Wells in place. And they were talking about putting it where her home's, where she used to live. That doesn't make sense to me. They should be, to me, the best site for a statue for Ida B. Wells would be around in Church Park near historic Beale Street Baptist Church, because that's where the newspaper was that she worked on. It's still near the market, that's near FedEx Forum, where there was another office that she worked at. And then she knew Robert Church Sr. like everybody else did. He at one time loaned her money in hard times. So, and Beale Street Baptist Church is one of the churches that she used to go to, in addition to Avery Chapel and some of these other churches that were then mostly all downtown, because most of those black churches built after the Civil War were along the Beale Street area. So that's where it should go. Beale Street, during her heyday, that's when Beale Street was becoming the epicenter of the black social, political, and economic life in Memphis. So she was very much a part of that. It should go on Beale Street somewhere.
Thank you, Dr. Jenkins. I mean, I could stay here all day, or you get all this information that we need to hear and get amplified. And I want to thank you so much for your continued service to the community. It's always awesome to run into you and also hear about your. I got to talk to you about the Frederick Douglass stuff that you went to Scotland.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we got to talk about that separately because I think that's very important. But thank you so much for carrying the torch of our ancestors, our righteous ancestors, and for keeping us aware of what's going on. And keep on doing the good work you're doing. Amplify blessings in the words of Great Duke Ellington. We love you madly. Keep on producing and pushing.
Thank you.